Right, so I'm going to rank, in my opinion, the Alice Cooper Band albums, and this is from the late 60s through to the 70s. I haven't heard the new one, which has only just come out, and I'm doing this because I bought the 2 box sets of these original album classics. So I've got the 7 original albums they made. Back in the day, I was familiar with, 4 of them. I sort of knew one of them a bit, and I hadn't heard the first 2. So that's probably influenced my judgment on this ranking. But so the first one, and people will be a bit surprised by this probably, is Muscle of Love. Now, I did hear Muscle of Love when it came out, and I think for me and just about everybody else, it was a disappointment. They dropped Bob Ezrin, the producer, that had basically made the 4 best albums they made. Probably a lot of it was to do with Bob Ezrin's production, and it seems to be, listening to it again, it seems a bit dull, and unlike some of the others, which made me want to listen to them more, I think I listened to this a couple of times and felt no urge to listen to it anymore. I liked the song Teenage Lament, and I was still a teenager when I heard it, and it has that anthemic chorus, but even that could have been bigger. It did sound a bit wimpy, I suppose. Hard-Hearted Alice is a song with a sort of slightly cool groove, and the band had a tendency towards parody and to sort of show off their versatility, and I think on this album parody and versatility was sort of all they had left. So you've got things like The Man with the Golden Gun, which is quite clever but not very interesting, and there's sort of the rock and roll songs. They when they were running a bit short of ideas, I think they tended to go for like the Rolling Stones influence. One of the things I've always wondered about this album, seeing as we know that Johnny Rotten was a Alice Cooper fan, when I first heard the word Sex Pistols, I immediately thought they've got that from Muscle of Love. So that's something, perhaps. At number 6, I have Pretties for You. Now, Alice Cooper was discovered by Frank Zappa, and the story is that they went into the studio to record this, and Zappa was ill and had to go home, so they had to finish it on their own, which is... the album is a bit messy, and when I first heard it, my first impression was, this is a bit messy, but I find that I keep going. It's one of the ones I kept listening to. So whereas with Muscle of Love, I listened to it maybe once, with this one I've listened to it loads of times. So being with Zappa probably made him. It was like a double-edged sword. It was probably he was a bit of a joke. Yeah, Captain Beefheart said he didn't want to be on bills with Alice Cooper because it was like the other Zappa acts, Wildman Fisher and the GTOs. It wasn't particularly serious. The other problem is it doesn't sound like the other Alice Cooper albums, not even like the one that came after it. It's very psychedelic, and there's sort of lots of peace and love and not much violent death. I think the high spot on this album is the song Reflected, which is they later turned into Elected, and had they not done that, the song Reflected would be quite a popular number. There's like a song called Living, which has the line, living is only one part of being, and this is a quite, tomorrow never knows. There's something very psychedelic Beatles-ish about this, along with the Who, Sellout Era, and SF Sorrow by the Pretty Things, and it's got plenty of little hooks that get stuck in your head, and it's got mid-60s vocal harmonies, and it's got some fairly nice jazzy guitar, and but the problem is it's probably a bit too much unstructured noise in it. Had I heard this album in 1969, I would probably have loved it. Especially if I'd heard it before I heard Interstellar Overdrive. But nowadays, it just sounds like they're trying to fill out time, which is probably not the case, because there are live tracks by the Alice Cooper Band from this era on YouTube, and they do actually sound, they were playing live like they did in the studio. They probably just went into the studio and played their live set, so all these strange noises were part of their act. And of course in 1969 that kind of thing was quite popular. Led Zeppelin doing Whole Lotta Love, or Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf. One of the best tracks on this album is called Levity Ball, but they chose to do a live recording, put a live recording on the album, and it's quite distorted, and that's a bit of a disappointment. But the album's got some really good harmonica playing from Alice, Vince as he was then, Vince Furnier, and the final song, Changing Arranging, could have been another great song had they put a bit more care into it. But it's all very chaotic, but the chaos might be part of the charm of this album, and might be a reason why I keep going back to it. At number 5 I have the album Easy Action. Now this was the other album that they recorded for Frank Zappa, and this time they had a proper producer. They had David Briggs, who was more famous as Neil Young's producer, but they had still not found that horror aesthetic that became their trademark, even though the song Mr. and Misdemeanor is a song about gangsters, and the sound of it sounds more like the later Alice Cooper. Alice is now singing with that Alice Cooper voice. And there's also a song called Refrigerator Heaven, which is like oddly predicts the future, because it's about cryogenics. And the album has some West Side Story references. The title, Easy Action, is a line from West Side Story, and I'm always up for a bit of West Side Story. Obviously, they did more of it on one of their albums that I've ranked higher than this. The second song, Shoe Salesman, is a really catchy pop song about heroin use. One of my favourite tracks on Easy Action is probably Beautiful Flyaway, which is a slowish piano-led track that was sung and mostly written by Michael Bruce. He was the rhythm guitarist and keyboard player who wrote most of the Alice Cooper Band's original songs, along with usually Alice writing the lyrics and occasionally other members of the band. Beautiful Flyaway has a whimsical English feel. It's sort of like, it sounds to me like Stackridge or Caravan, or even solo Paul McCartney, Ram era. Then we also get Return of the Spiders, which is a powerful rock number that's driven by drums that sound a bit like the drums on Wipeout. I think the drumming is an important part of the Alice Cooper Band's sound. It's that tribal tom-tom beat, which is always my favourite kind of drumming. This album does have some pretty decent songs, but it does have some of those freak-out sections that do tend to sound a bit like filler. On this album, I would say they sound more controlled. It's less random weirdness and more like something Captain Beefheart would have done. I remember when I was younger, I saw a film of Alice Cooper. It was part of I think it was either a documentary about a pop festival or something. and it was probably supporting another film I saw at the cinema. I remember seeing like the Pink Floyd film and the Emerson, Lake and Palmer film. So I knew about Alice Cooper from having seen this clip, and I also knew about, well, he was always quite well known before I'd heard any of the music. He was famous for his snake, and there was this rumour that he'd bit the head off a chicken, which is apparently untrue, but he probably, I don't think he denied it. It was all good publicity. I think Zappa encouraged him in that manner, and I mean, I don't know if, because I might well have heard the Frank Zappa album live at the Fillmore before I'd heard Alice Cooper, and in that they make fun of Alice Cooper. There's a chorus where they all shout Alice Cooper, ah, it makes me scream, that kind of thing. Anyway, my next one, so this is number 4, is School's Out. I was aware of Alice Cooper, and by the time this came out, I'd actually heard some Alice Cooper, but I was absolutely delighted when he was on Top of the Pops. And there was something about being on Top of the Pops at that time. It was like anybody who was into sort of heavy rock. It was like inspirational, because we'd had Alice Cooper, and I think around about the same time Hawkwind had Silver Machine, and you had Deep Purple and people like that, and it seemed it felt the same way as it did, like around about 1977, when Top of the Pops had the Jam and the Boomtown Rats and the Buzzcocks and those kind of bands. It seemed to be a good time to be young, and I was at school when School's Out came out, so it appealed to me even more so. There's lots of instrumental passages on this album which might suggest a dearth of material, but sometimes, once again, as in Muscle of Love, I suspect that they sort of the band like to show off their versatility, and these parts often border on parody. But I'm a great fan of West Side Story, and I think I liked the bit where they do When You're a Jet, and I think they play the Bernstein's music. I think they play that quite well. I'm not keen on the song Looney Tune, and the song Blue Turk is one of those Stray Cat Strut Hit the Road Jack type songs that use the Andalusian progression. It's another one of these things that people seem to do when they run out of ideas, but it does swing, and it does have plenty of soloing. Public Animal number 9 seems to be a nod to the Stones doing Motown, and it's okay. They return to the school theme with the song Alma Mater, which is a strange, distorted, slightly 50-ish, slightly Beatles-ish number that may have been trying to be nostalgic. The album ends with an instrumental that seems to be a pastiche of a Quincy Jones TV theme, possibly a programme about spies or cops or lawyers. Something like Ironside, I suppose. It's all very clever and quite entertaining, but apart from that one epoch-shattering monster smash hit single, it is a bit underwhelming, I think, compared to the album that came before it. Number 3, I have Love It to Death. Now, any one of the next 3 albums could be in any one of the top 3 places. Love It to Death, the Alice Cooper band moved to Detroit, and they employed Bob Ezrin as a producer, and it's a really good album. It's probably one of the 4 founding albums of heavy rock, if you can put it that way. It starts with the song Caught in a Dream, it was heavy pop. It's got that sort of hard rock feeling, but it's also got a bit of their Beatlesy past. I saw an interview with Alice, or I heard an interview with him on the radio, where he said that they were big Beatles fans and Anglophiles, and they had played with a lot of the English bands that came over. The next track is 18, which was a big hit single in America. We didn't really hear it in Britain. I don't think I ever heard it on the radio. But once again, this I think is the song that defines the sound of the rock single. I was yet to be 18 at the time, so it didn't have the same resonance to me as School's Out. We got Long Way to Go, which is another really strong heavy rock song. All the songs are really good. There are no weak songs on this album, I don't think. I mean, Black Juju is one of the standouts, which is it's got those tribal tom-toms, and it sounds a bit like Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun by Pink Floyd. Only it has this like heavy Black Sabbath type riff and a sort of Tony Iommi type melodic guitar solo. And it builds these peaks with cries of bodies. It's on this album that they nailed the gruesome aesthetic. There's the Ballad of Dwight Fry, which is a song about insanity. As the track builds and the band gets heavier, the music just gets more intense as Alice's performance gets increasingly unhinged. Then this goes into Sunrise, which was the hit for Rolf Harris. Rolf Harris co-wrote it, and I don't think the Americans who review this album understand the problem us British have with Rolf Harris. I mean, I used to love this song, and it reminded me of Saturday evening, you know, the light entertainment, and he's drawing those mad pictures with his paint that's pouring down. I was there. It was happy days. My parents would, you know, I imagined crumpets and roaring fire and all this. And then it turned out he was a bit of a sex pest, and we don't really talk about him anymore. It's a pity, because I think it's a really good song, and I particularly like Alice Cooper's version of it. At number 2, I have Billion Dollar Babies. Now, there are 3 of their best singles on this album, and it starts with Hello Hooray, which is that's got like a fanfare of harmony guitars, and I just love Alice's call out of "Let the show begin, are you ready?" And then the whole thing climaxes with that shout of "I feel so strong," and it makes me feel strong. I love that song, but it is a cover, so I probably mark this down to number 2. That's one of the reasons this isn't at number 1, is because the best song on it is a cover. And there was also the hit single No More Mr. Night Sky, but this is another one of those Stonesy type songs. And then we've also got Elected, which was a rewrite of Reflected, and I would have liked to have seen them redo Reflected and given that song the success it deserved. So these are all reasons why I'm putting this at number 2. Generally speaking, the lyrics of this, by this time, Alice is writing pretty good lyrics, and each song is like its own rock opera, especially the song Unfinished Suite, which has that uplifting la la riff, la 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 la. But after a while, the whole dentist drill and all the audio theatrics can get a bit tiring. There is also the song Mary Ann, which is very much a Broadway show tune, and I quite like it. It has a simple melody, and it has a bit of gender confusion, which I also quite like. But the actual song is quite a short Alice Cooper Michael Bruce composition And what makes it epic is the session piano player. So another one to mark this one down to number 2 is the best track, one of the best tracks, and the band aren't even playing on it. The album ends with I Love the Dead, which is probably the quintessential Alice Cooper band song. And so number 1 on my list is Killer. And I've got to say it's all killer, no filler. Now I can remember hearing the song Under My Wheels on the radio, and I really liked it. I mean, it is a bit. It's probably it's a rock and roll song. It's not particularly heavy, but the production and everything about it, the theatrics, and having heard that, so a friend of mine bought the Killer album, and we listened to it a lot. And he also bought Love It to Death. So presumably what happened was that I had those 2 albums on either side of a C90 cassette. And I had my currency at the time was I had all the Led Zeppelin albums. So people would lend me their albums and I'd lend them mine. And yeah, so we sort of already knew about Alice Cooper because we were interested in Frank Zappa, and we just heard the stories about his stagecraft and the snake and everything. And of course the Killer album has a snake on it. After Under My Wheels, we get the song Be My Lover, and I really like that song. It reminds me of Sweet Jane. I like the way on this album, if anything, Alice sings a bit like Iggy. It's possibly because they moved to Detroit. And so we got Under My Wheels, and there are a couple of other sort of rock and roll, heavy rock and roll songs. There's Nervous and there's Yeah Yeah, and these were just pushing the whole concept of rock and roll in a heavier direction long before AC/DC did much the same thing. We've also got the song Desperado, which sounds like a dark spaghetti western. And then there's Dead Babies. This is like a hard rock operetta. It's musically it's like a jigsaw. All the instruments go in and out of each other. It's really clever arrangements. It's sort of almost like a classical ensemble. And there's these slightly operatic backing vocals, sort of maybe like the Who did on A Quick One While He's Away, only this is much darker and much heavier. Then we have Halo of Flies, which is like a prog rock epic. It builds up to this fast section that reminds me of Rondo by The Nice or Sabre Dance by Love Sculpture. So on this album they've introduced like heavy rock and roll like AC/DC. There's sort of elements of punk with the Lou Reed type song, and there's this guitar prog thing with like it's a bit Wishbone Ash or Thin Lizzy or but not Yes, but the Peter Banks's band he had after Yes, Flash. It's very it's ahead of its time, I think. And the album ends with the song Killer, which is this moody, largely instrumental piece that brings everything to a scary end. That's Killer, my favourite Alice Cooper band album. And all I've got now to do is get a copy of the new one and see what that's like.